If you look at the 2026 WTA ranking system, you will see an order that feels completely impossible to break. It is a rigid world ruled by towering serving machines and aggressive flat power hitters. You have these elite athletes who dictate every single point from the very first swing of the racket. They step onto the stadium court and they simply overwhelm you with sheer physical force. The entire sport has seemingly been solved by pure power. But at the recent Rome Masters, something violently broke that flawless system. The perfect tennis machine named Elena Rybakina was pushed into the absolute worst defensive position of her entire professional career. She was gasping for air after every long rally. She was suffocated on the red dirt. She was forced to play a desperate and reactive style of tennis she completely despises. And all of this brutal tactical dismantling was done by a player that absolutely no American analyst had on their radar just 6 months ago. The American tennis elite do not just call Alex Eala a rising star anymore. Behind closed doors and in the quiet analysis rooms of the most prestigious academies, they call her the absolute nightmare of the seeded players. When you watch her play, you realize immediately that her weapon is not raw physical power. She does not look like she can blast you off the baseline with pure muscle. But she possesses a highly sophisticated tactical system designed to completely assassinate the rhythm of any opponent standing across the net. She methodically strips away your time. She systematically strips away your comfort. She makes the most dominant and elite athletes in the world look entirely lost on the court they used to own. To understand exactly why Alex Eala is suddenly becoming a fatal glitch in the tactical system. Of the top 10, we have to look at something the standard broadcast camera rarely catches. We cannot just look at the final score or the highlight reel. We have to look deep into the invisible physics of ball acceleration and rotational energy. Modern women's tennis is currently dominated by one overwhelming and singular philosophy: first strike tennis. The entire elite ranking system is built entirely around athletes who can hit the ball flatter and faster than anyone else on the planet. The ultimate goal on the professional tour right now is to end the point in exactly 3 touches. Serve, return, kill shot. That is the proven formula. That is exactly how you win Grand Slams in 2026. Players like Elena Rybakina and Aryna Sabalenka absolutely thrive in this specific ecosystem because they are the apex predators of first strike tennis. They want the ball arriving incredibly fast. They want the ball arriving perfectly flat. They absolutely hate extended rallies that drag them side to side and burn through their leg endurance. And they especially hate high bouncing balls that force them to hit out of their ideal strike zone up near their shoulders. We need to establish a very clear technical baseline here to truly understand the genius of this revolution. There is a massive physical difference between hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball heavy. Hitting hard is purely about pace. The ball travels in a straight line over the net and relies on blinding speed to blast past the opponent before they can even react. It is linear. It is completely predictable. Hitting heavy, however, is about immense topspin and the physical weight of the shot upon impact. It is a completely different kind of athletic pressure on the body. When a ball is hit heavy, it does not just glide smoothly through the air. It violently dives down into the court and explodes upward right at the throat of the opponent. The entire elite tier of the WTA is programmed to deal with flat pace. They train every single day in the gym and on the practice courts to absorb pure speed and redirect it cleanly down the lines. Their muscle memory is calibrated to absolute perfection for fast and flat tennis. They actually love it when you hit hard because they can just use your own pace against you to generate their own power. It feeds their entire system. But their physical programming is completely malfunctioning when they face what Alex Eala is doing to the yellow ball. She is entirely refusing to give them the one thing they desperately need to survive: pace. Just when the first strike system seemed absolutely perfect and completely unbeatable, Alex Eala stepped onto the stadium court and introduced a radically new kind of athletic poison. She took the chaotic and heavy trajectory of a traditional clay court ball and forcefully compressed it into the elite arenas of the modern tour. It is a total tactical shock to the system of these power hitters. The sheer brilliance of this strategy is changing how we look at the future of the entire sport. If you love discovering these hidden tactical layers that the mainstream sports media completely ignores, you should become a part of our community right now by subscribing, because we are decoding the future of elite sports every single week. But the heavy poison Eala uses is only the first piece of a much larger and far more dangerous puzzle. The very first weapon that transforms Eala into a complete nightmare is the pure physics living inside her forehand. While 80% of the top 10 relies on a flat and driving shot to pierce through, the court Eala produces a ball with a violently abnormal revolutions per minute count. We need to stop looking at the standard broadcast angle and freeze the frame entirely to see the raw biomechanics happening right in front of us. If you look at a typical power hitter, you see a very linear transfer of energy. They step directly into the ball and drive their body weight violently forward through the contact zone. The racket face meets the ball incredibly flat. The goal is to hit straight through the target. But freeze the tape on Eala and look at her kinetic chain. It is a completely different physical equation. She creates torque starting directly from the balls of her feet. She pulls that raw physical energy up through her calves into her hips and uncoils her entire torso with a massive wrist snap at the exact millisecond of impact. When we talk about the kinetic chain, we are talking about how the human body generates maximum force from the ground up. Most players leak energy somewhere along that chain. A slight hesitation in the knee bend or a late shoulder turn costs them severe power. But Ayla is a true biomechanical marvel. Her energy transfer is completely seamless and terrifyingly efficient. She plants her back foot with massive intent. The energy travels up through a deeply coiled core and explodes out through a flexible wrist that acts exactly like a violent whips. This specific whip effect is exactly what generates those terrifying rotational numbers on the tracking data. The heavy ball is not just a tactical choice. It is a physical manifestation of perfect structural mechanics. She is brushing up the back of the yellow ball with so much ferocious velocity that it generates a massive amount of topspin. The ball is quite literally spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. When you watch this happen on a live television feed, the ball seems to travel a bit slower through the air. You might even wonder why she is not hitting it much harder. But the true magic happens the exact millisecond that ball makes physical contact with the red clay or the hard court surface. A flat ball glides smoothly through the court and stays exactly at waist height. That specific height is the absolute perfect strike zone for a tall and powerful player. But the Eala forehand does not glide at all. It bites violently into the grit of the court surface. The extreme forward rotation hits the immense friction of the ground and kicks the ball aggressively upward toward the sky. Instead of meeting the ball at a perfectly comfortable waist height, the elite power hitters are suddenly forced to make contact way up by their shoulders. This completely destroys their fundamental ability to hit down on the ball. They lose absolutely all of their physical leverage. They lose all of their natural and fluid power. They are suddenly fighting the heavy ball instead of actively attacking it. Imagine trying to swing a heavy baseball bat when the pitch is located right at your neck. You simply cannot generate any meaningful force. That is exactly what Eala does to the greatest female athletes in the world. Every single time she hits a deep cross-court forehand, she aggressively steals their leverage. This heavy topspin strategy acts like a heavy physical weight vest strapped tightly to the chest of her opponents. Every single extended rally forces them to expend 20% more physical energy just to get the heavy ball back over the net. Over the grueling course of a 2-hour match, that physical toll compounds drastically. The legs of the flat power hitters begin to burn intensely. Their lungs scream for oxygen. Their flat ground strokes begin to clip the net cord because they no longer have the explosive leg strength required to stay low to the ground. Eala is not just beating them with spectacular highlight reel winners. She is slowly and methodically draining their athletic battery point by painful point. The sheer biomechanical efficiency of her looping swing means she can comfortably reproduce this heavy ball thousands of times without fatiguing her own shoulder or arm. She has successfully weaponized the physics of rotational energy against the physics of pure linear velocity. It is a brilliant and highly systemic counter to the dominant meta of modern professional tennis. However, if Eala only had a heavy forehand, she would just be another standard defensive clay court specialist. The thing that actually collapses the seeded players entirely lives in how she distributes space. The exact thing American coaches are secretly analyzing in the dark film rooms right now is not just how she hits the tennis ball, but how she radically manipulates physical space. Eala takes the entire classical principle of clay court sliding and morphs it into a violently active defensive system. Most players on the professional tour view defense as an act of pure desperation and survival. They scramble frantically from side to side. They stretch desperately for the ball and pray they can just keep the point alive for one more shot. They run. They stop abruptly. They rapidly change direction. This traditional running technique requires massive amounts of muscular braking force from the quadriceps. It is incredibly jarring on the knees and the ankles of the athlete. But Eala does not run like the rest of the professional tour. She slides beautifully. She uses the natural friction of the court surface to smoothly absorb her own forward momentum. Instead of planting her foot hard and jarring her sensitive joints, she glides effortlessly into the deep corners of the baseline. This flawless sliding technique allows her to actually hit the ball while she is still actively moving. It shaves critical fractions of a second off her physical recovery time. The exact moment she strikes the yellow ball, she is already pushing off the slide and moving directly back to the absolute center of the court. She is essentially playing the entire game half a second faster than her opponents, without actually sprinting any faster. This is the exact moment everything changes in the tactical landscape. Have you ever noticed how some rare elite players seem to always be perfectly positioned, no matter how hard the opponent hits the ball out wide? Let me know in the comments below if you have ever seen a player do this successfully on a fast, hard court, because it is incredibly rare and I really want to know who you think moves the best in the modern era. Because of this elite spatial manipulation, Eala turns deep defense into immediate and lethal offense. Let us look incredibly closely at the tactical masterclass she delivered against Rybakina on the dirt in Rome. We have this incredibly tense cat-and-mouse sequence right in the chaotic middle of the second set. Rybakina blasts a massive flat forehand directly down the line. It is a blistering shot that would be a clean, unreturnable winner against 99% of the entire tennis tour. The Italian crowd is already starting to cheer loudly. The broadcast commentator is taking a deep breath to announce the end of the point. But Eala is already waiting there. She slides deep into the dusty corner. She absorbs the massive pace of the incoming shot and immediately redirects it with a heavy, looping angle crosscourt. The television edit feels incredibly fast and chaotic because the natural rhythm of the point is totally shattered. Rybakina is completely shocked to see the heavy ball come back over the net. She now has to scramble awkwardly forward and hit the ball late. Late contact is the absolute ultimate death sentence for a flat power hitter. When you hit the ball late, your racket face opens up completely and the ball flies long past the baseline. Eala repeatedly and intentionally baited Rybakina into hitting massive, aggressive shots only to absorb all of them and force her to hit one extra grueling ball. Think about how a smart boxer uses the ropes to absorb a heavy punch and instantly bounce back with a vicious counterstrike. That is exactly what Eala is doing with the baseline. She uses the very geometry of the court as her own personal weapon. By sliding into the shot, she completely negates the raw velocity of the incoming ball. The pace simply vanishes into her fluid movement. And because she hits a heavy topspin ball back, she forces the power hitter to generate absolutely all of their own pace on the next shot. Power hitters completely hate generating their own pace on a high-bouncing ball. It is the most uncomfortable physical sensation in the sport. The mental frustration on the court is entirely visible. You can actually see the sheer panic setting into the eyes of the champion. The perfect tennis machine is suddenly rushing her delicate shots. She is swinging wildly and erratically because she feels the physical space closing in around her like a trap. Every time Rybakina tried to hit flat and hard down the line, Eala was already gliding into the perfect defensive position. The massive stadium crowd went completely silent during these brutal physical exchanges. You could only hear the heavy thud of the tennis ball and the exhausted breathing of the top seed. The tension was completely unbearable. Eala was not just beating a top-ranked player. She was entirely dismantling the underlying logic of how a top player is supposed to win. She was proving on live television that absolute power has a very clear and distinct limit. Eala effectively shrinks the physical dimensions of the tennis court. She makes a massive outdoor stadium feel like a tiny claustrophobic cage for the opponent across the net. She brutally takes away the sharp angles. She takes away the crucial time. She takes away the very oxygen in the rally. The opponent begins to desperately feel like no matter how incredibly hard they hit the ball, it will always come back heavier and deeper than the time before. It is a psychological torture chamber perfectly disguised as a professional tennis match. Tactical theory is one thing, but the raw numbers sitting on the ATP and WTA computer. Systems right now paint a truly horrifying picture for the rest of the professional tour. If you still think all of this tactical analysis is just wild theory on paper, you need to look at the raw data directly from the computers. During that brutal match where she forced Rybakina into a defensive shell, Eala maintained a first-serve return win, rate at a level so high that the artificial intelligence tracking system actually flagged it as a statistical anomaly. We are talking about returning the massive weapon of a Grand Slam champion. When Rybakina steps up to the service line, she fully expects to win the vast majority of those points completely untouched. Her serve regularly clocks in at terrifying speeds that usually guarantee free and easy points. The computer algorithm looks at the raw velocity of her serve and calculates a near-zero chance for the receiver to win the rally. But the match data shows Eala was winning an absolutely staggering percentage of those exact points. This specific statistical reality is completely mathematically impossible for a player who does not rely on a massive power serve of her own to bail her out of trouble. Normal players simply block the fast serve back and pray for a mistake. Eala was actively absorbing the blinding speed of the first serve and instantly neutralizing the entire point with her heavy topspin return. She was breaking down the most lethal offensive weapon on the professional tour, not with equal power, but with supreme geometric positioning and flawless timing. She completely reversed the mathematical advantage of the server. If you want even more concrete proof of this systemic breakdown, you just have to look at the global ranking board. At the very beginning of the year 2026, Eala was sitting quietly around rank 150 in the world. She was fighting desperately in the grueling qualification rounds on the outer courts just to get into the main tournament draws. But within just the first 5 months of 2026, she executed an absolutely violent surge up the professional ladder. She completely shattered the mathematical projections of every single sports agency and landed firmly inside the top 50. She is now officially ranked number 44 in the world. When you take that exact ranking trajectory and place it right next to the early career graphs of former world number ones, you see something completely shocking. The sheer acceleration rate of her climb is physically breaking the standard forecasting algorithms used by the professional tour. Normal players absolutely do not jump 100 spots in 5 months without relying on a massive and physically imposing power game. They usually have to grind their way up slowly over multiple grueling years of development. But Eala is bypassing the traditional gatekeepers entirely. She is sprinting past established veterans who simply have no tactical answer for her heavy ball. Because you have stayed with me this deep into the tactical breakdown, I am going to share a piece of exclusive data that the mainstream broadcast networks are completely ignoring right now. There is an underground predictive rating system used by elite tennis analysts to truly measure player danger. When you plug in the exact return metrics Eala generated in Rome, this hidden formula reveals a terrifying truth for the top seeds. With her highly specific ability to win critical return points against massive serves on a slower clay court Eala currently holds, a higher statistical probability of defeating the number one seed than any other player ranked completely outside the top 20. The math literally says she is a giant killer hiding in plain sight. A massive jump from rank 150 to 44 in just 5 months is not a lucky streak of temporary good form. It is the undeniable signature of a fatal system glitch that the rest of the tour simply has not patched yet. What we are witnessing right now is not just the inspiring rise of another talented young athlete on the global stage. Eala is actively presenting a brutal survival test for the absolute elite tier of the sport. Imagine the absolute panic happening inside the private training camps of the major champions right now. Her entire style of play is going to forcefully dictate how the heavy power hitters train for the next 2 years. The elite coaches of the top 10 players are scrambling desperately. They finally realize their tall athletes can no longer just hit the gym and lift heavier weights to survive the upcoming seasons. Pure strength is no longer enough. They actually have to go back to the practice courts and painfully relearn how to hit high, heavy balls out of their absolute worst strike zone. They are forcing their champions to stand at the baseline while hitting partners feed them horrible bouncing balls for hours on end. The physical frustration in those practice sessions must be completely overwhelming. Eala is not just climbing the rankings to quietly join the elite club. She is violently redefining the exact physical requirements needed to win against tall and powerful opponents. She is actively proving that tactical gravity will eventually pull down even the strongest and fastest hitters in the world. She is demonstrating that supreme intelligence and rotational physics can completely dismantle a culture obsessed with linear power. The elite ranking system has been completely hacked by a young tactical genius. The biggest question right now is no longer whether Eala will break into the top 10 because the undeniable math already proves she is well on her way. The real question is how long it will take the current top 5 players to develop a physical antibody against this heavy topspin poison. Do you think anyone in the current top tier has the necessary tactical tools in the court, intelligence to actually solve the Eala equation before the upcoming Grand Slam begins? Drop your most detailed technical predictions in the comments below and make sure you subscribe right now so you do not miss the exact moment we decode the final answer in our next major tactical breakdown.